So I'll go ahead and start. My name is Dan Preby, and I am an actuary. I grew up in the health field, so I've been an actuary now for about 25 years.
My name is Jim Miles. I've been a volunteer in the education system since the year after I became a fellow, became a fellow in 1980, so a long time ago.
Okay, hi, I'm Stuart Klugman. I'm currently a staff fellow working for the Society of Actuaries. Been doing that since 2009.
The whole purpose of the exams is we, the SOA, the members of the SOA, expect actuaries to be qualified. And it's not only that we, the SOA and members, expect actuaries to be qualified, the public expects it, government regulators expect it, your employers expect it. So there's a lot of expectation that comes with, they want you to be qualified. And so the whole purpose of the exam process is to make sure that you're qualified actuaries. And you'll find through your career that one of your most valuable assets, if not the most valuable asset you have professionally, is your qualification. So what you want is to make sure that your peers are qualified as well. And so what the exam process does is it gives us the ability to communicate to you what we want you to learn. And it also gives you the ability to show us why you think you're qualified. In other words, to show us what you know, okay? So when you see that pen on a slide, what that means is that there's a point of communication. And the communication is really important because it goes beyond the examinations themselves. Because you're going to have to communicate with actuaries and non-actuaries throughout your career on what you know. And there's an inherent, qualification, if you will, an inherent assumption that you are qualified when you have the credentials. And so it's up to us and it's up to you to make sure that that level of trust that everybody has is still at a very high level. So we want you to make sure that everybody's, I hate to use the word again, qualified.
All right. How many of you recall at some point or other seeing the phrases instructional objectives or learning objectives and learning outcomes? Okay. Can someone tell me where you see them? In the syllabus. So for every exam, we have a syllabus document that states instructional objectives and learning outcomes that are associated with the examination you're preparing for. What's interesting is that these aren't just for you, they're also for the folks who write the questions. So one of the things that's the theme of this section is everything that happens with the exam process is governed by the objectives and by the outcomes. They're the ones you need to master, and they're the ones the item writers are creating questions that will help assess whether candidates have indeed achieved those objectives. We have committees, curriculum committees, that develop the objectives and outcomes for each of the examinations. And so what do? They meet regularly. One of the things we didn't mention as part of the great things about being part of the volunteer system for all those years is committees, within reason, get to decide where they meet. And so these committees, while they're putting together the syllabus for your exam, they're often doing it in an environment that's conducive to being away from work and relaxed and trying to create the best exam possible for you. One of the things we do is tend to review the syllabus thoroughly once per year. Now you know that each exam is given twice per year, but we try really hard to only make changes to the syllabus once a year. In the interim period, we will typically only make a change under one of two circumstances. Sometimes one of the readings for the exam is updated, a new edition of a book becomes available, the old one goes out of print, and we need to accommodate that for the very next exam sitting. Occasionally something happens in the profession that the committee believes just has to be added to the very next exam, and they'll do that. But otherwise, they try to keep the syllabus stable for two consecutive exam sessions. At our website, somewhere, and I know sometimes it's hard to find things, but it is there, is the schedule for which exams are on which cycle. So you can tell whether your exam that you're taking in the fall will be the same syllabus in the spring, or is one of those exams that might get some new syllabus elements the next spring. And typically on the syllabus itself, it often says, this is the syllabus for fall 2014 and spring 2015. So that's another clue that it's one that's not likely to be revised over the next period. So what about these? Instructional objectives tell you what you're expected to be examined on, and then we find out the next part is the outcomes that talk about how you're expected to demonstrate that information. So as I mentioned, this is communication both for the folks writing the exam questions, but it's as well communication to you to help you understand what we're expecting you to be able to know and to do as you go through the studies for your examination. So here's an example of an instructional objective. And for the examples for this seminar, we've chosen ones from one of the ERM exams, partly because at least the ERM exam is available on every track for those of you who want to earn the CERA credential in addition to your FSA, but also some of the terminology and words use maybe a little bit less jargon than if we'd picked a question from one of the tracks. So that's what we're going to use for the examples here. So here's an instructional objective. It's from the fall 2013 ERM exam, and they almost always feature the word understand. And I hope you would agree that if this was all you had, it's not sufficient to tell you really what the committee's expecting of you. What does it mean to understand something? Well, as we'll talk about throughout the seminar, there's levels of understanding, there's levels at which you can demonstrate knowledge and acquire knowledge for that matter. So would understand mean to be able to define economic capital? Would understand mean to work with economic capital? Or would understand mean to calculate economic capital? And you can't tell from this description. So this is the high level, but you know what this part of the syllabus is all about. It's about economic capital and risk measures, and it says techniques to allocate the cost of risk to business units. So you know what it's about, but we're a long way at this point from understanding what it is you're expected to be able to do and demonstrate on your examination. So that takes us to the next step, which is learning outcomes. So let's not look in detail at this, but look at some of the key things here. It talks about words like concepts and basic elements. So notice you have to know basic elements. Apparently you don't have to know advanced elements of economic capital. Maybe not entirely sure what that means, but it gives you a little bit of guide to how deep some of those readings might go. Proposed techniques. So you're going to have, apparently you better learn some techniques along the way. And more important, you're going to have to propose some techniques. So that means make some decisions. You're to demonstrate, you're to apply. And in fact, as a preview of what's to come, on the next one we've underlined verbs. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about verbs, because they really do guide you in what you're expected to learn and be able to do, and what kind of questions the item writers are going to prepare on this material. So for example, define the basic elements. Well, apparently if you can write down, if you know what the elements are and can write down a definition, you've met that outcome. Some of them are a little more challenging. Like I said before, propose techniques. Looks like you're going to have to make a choice. So you might be given a situation here, and you'll need to know which techniques go with what kinds of situations. So it won't be enough to just be able to list and describe techniques. You're going to be able to make some choices between the ones that you've been learning about. Contrast. So apparently there's various kinds of economic capital, and you're going to be expected to understand the similarities and differences among those various kinds of economic capital. Again, not just be able to say what they are. You'll be able to explain things. I guess that means you're going to be able to write some paragraphs and tell somebody else what it's all about. Demonstrate. So it looks like maybe an example or complete an assignment with regard to something in that category. But the key is for you to be sensitive to the verbs that are being used, because the exam committees are sensitive to the verbs that are going to be used. They look back to this as their guidance for what they can write questions about and how deep they can go. Now, here's something that's also part of the syllabus, of course, is the other component is the readings. So each syllabus comes with a list of the things you're supposed to read. Now, in theory, and I'll say it's theory, but it's one way I think we carry out pretty well, the learning objectives and outcomes drive the syllabus, not the other way around. We don't say what's out there that you can read, and then from that we'll figure out what it is we can expect you to know after you're done reading it. We much rather start with what do you need to know to be a qualified fellow of the Society of Actuaries, and then find readings to support it. Now, occasionally, we just aren't able to get something that's satisfactory, and we have to make some compromises. Sometimes we'll commission some material if there's a gap that we believe the existing materials aren't taken care of.